The rallying cry of Jew hatred is to globalize the Intifada, the violent uprising against Jews. Hence, the Arab Street is coming to Broadway and Michigan Avenue.
And now, the Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the Books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Welcome to the Edwin Black Show, coming to you twice monthly from Washington, D.C. Today, we observe International Farhud Day 2024, and you won't like our observations. Hello, I'm Edwin Black, investigative journalist, historian, and author of 215 editions in 40 languages in 190 countries worldwide, including IBM and the Holocaust, Nazi Nexus, the Farhud, Roots of the Arab Nazi Alliance in the Holocaust. That one we're especially looking at today, as well as other books. If you like our show's content, spread the word. You can subscribe for alerts at theedwinblackshow.com. And if you want to support our work, please visit theedwinblackshow.com/support. Your help, big or small, assures our complete and utter intellectual and uncensored journalistic independence. We're totally unmonetized, so thank you if you help. Today's episode is made possible and sponsored without any preconditions, requests, or stipulations by the Israel on Campus Coalition. That said, I only speak for myself and for history, and the same goes for my guests. Today, we welcome viewers from across America, including our 4 watch parties in the villages, Newton, Mass., Chicago, and Tampa Bay, led by Harvey. Overseas, I see viewers logged on from, we have Australia and New Zealand as always, Germany, Poland, Holland again, France, Italy, Spain, the Czech Republic, Great Britain, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, and Israel, including some people who should be in Los Angeles but are now in Israel, plus other countries. And if you have a question limited to today's topic, place one short sentence in Zoom's QA feature. The Edwin Black Show, along with our YouTube site, is global and fast growing, enjoying many tens of thousands of views. We speak frankly and without tremor to a fragmented world, seeking better understanding of our tormented past, our present, very, very tense, and a future still uncertain, very uncertain. By the way, stay tuned for my special word of wisdom at the very end of the show, just before I sign off. We'll get to our unwanted topic after a few minutes of announcements. And here they are. At the Edwin Black Show and our companion YouTube site, we have just released more compelling and hard-hitting episodes. First, see our frank and gripping episode on our immigration crisis. Second, our engaging episode from earlier this year, live from Mexico City. Third, see our very unsettling episode on America's destroyed cities, soon to appear across the United States. Then, the nerve-rattling unveiling of any free society's greatest threat, central control. All are edited with gripping music and indelible imagery. My appearance tour continues. I just returned from 3 weeks abroad. Earlier this month, I wrapped up 10 whirlwind days in Poland as the first scholar in residence of the International March of the Living, which gathered in thousands of vibrant commemorators and testifiers to the injunction, Am Israel Chai, the people of Israel live. It was nonstop for me in Warsaw, Krakow, and then at the door of death in Auschwitz-Birkenau, where more than 1 million were exterminated, with 2 finale lectures in Lodz, in the shadow of the ghetto, which trapped 250,000 souls. Remember that IBM's Data Processing Bureau in Krakow calculated just how much food calories per day could be systematically reduced in order to starve to death all of the residents of the ghetto, thus avoiding the expenditure of 70 pfennigs for a bullet. Then, from Poland, I flew overnight to Israel, where we met with numerous Jewish and Israeli leaders in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and took a painful trip 90 minutes south to the kibbutz massacre sites, where I inspected some of the most grisly scenes of personal destruction. An IDF guide showed me one totally shot up and exploded home, and then looking at the blasted ceiling above and the shambles on the floor, he said, "I used to live here." Find all of my appearances at edwinblack.com/events, and let us meet up in your city. Stand tall, San Diego, Detroit, Western Pennsylvania, Palm Beach. I'm coming your way to the best of my ability. While I still have the legs for it, I assure you, I am coming. Finally, I remind my viewers of a terrible website you must know about, publishing the ghoulish videos from October 7th. This contains the war crime documentation Israel will need to prosecute after the war. See it at Hamas-massacre.net before the deniers win their war of denial. Now to World War J, as I continue to document a mere sampling of the hate, violence, and escalating oppression inflicted upon the Jewish people, as well as Israel's war against Hamas. First, to the war in Gaza. As stated here months ago, the war in Gaza will roil on for the rest of this year. This, according to an announcement by Israeli military, now confirmed. I said it weeks ago, and now it's official. Earlier this week, the IDF broke through and seized the almost 9-mile sector of Western Rafah, codenamed the Philadelphia Corridor. That is the Gaza side of the border, crossing with Egypt. And what did they find? More than 50 tunnels crossing into Egypt, accessible by about 700 vertical shafts in clinics, schools, and ordinary residential buildings. In fact, yesterday, 3 Israeli soldiers were killed by a booby-trapped tunnel in a medical clinic. The IDF also retrieved Hamas weaponry identified as U.S. munitions sold to Egypt. Egypt? No wonder no one wanted us to go into Rafah. The truth now emerges, and emerges from a complex tunnel system crossing into Egypt, which apparently now proves continuous violation of the peace treaty with Israel. Further to Rafah, by now everyone has heard that Israel struck 2 senior Hamas commanders, and in doing so caused a fierce fire that burned many non-combatants in an IDF-designated safe zone. Here's the truth. First, the area was not a safe zone. It was more than a kilometer away from the actual safe zone. Second, Israel did not use 2,000-pound bombs, but 2 precision 17-kilogram small diameter bombs to take out the 2 commanders. But Hamas kept a major ammunition storage dump in the camp area, violating international war and warfare ethics. That illegal Hamas ammo dump caught fire and created a secondary explosion that trapped many men, women, and children. Yet Israel gets the blame and does a really poor job of correcting the record. Under international law, take note, when a church or a mosque or an embassy or a hospital or other protected area acquires a military component, it loses its protected status and becomes a legitimate legal military target. International law, mind you, is created in a long process that begins with commentators and ends with multinational treaties or conventions. In that vein, as a commentator, I am asserting a further understanding. When a civilian domicile or encampment comes under the control of the enemy and or features a military target, And when the enemy does not wear a uniform and dresses like civilians, and or where the civilian population is visibly supporting the militarized group, the area loses its protection so long as care is taken to protect non-combatants. I use the term non-combatants because I believe there are few, if any, innocent civilians in Gaza. Let me repeat that in case you missed it. Few, if any, innocent civilians in Gaza. They are a hateful society, and they're not quiet about it. They believe in sacrificing their sons and daughters, if only it can hasten the day when all Jews are killed. There is a tunnel access in virtually every structure in Gaza. And by the way, unfortunately, I think most of the hostages are, God forbid, dead. Final item. Many of us saw the chilling video of female soldiers being captured by Hamas soldiers and civilians. The chilling words of their captors, accustomed to generation sex violence, are included in the IDF's translation, and the Arabic word sabaya appears as, quote, women who can get pregnant, close quote. That is a poor translation by the IDF. The word sabaya means sex slave and is universally known by both Quranic and popular Muslim usage as sex slave. So all the commentary in that video clip is not about just a woman or a beautiful woman, but a sex slave. Now for the Jewish Defensive Boycott Report. Jews and friends of the Jewish people, and I think most of my viewers are not Jewish. Thank you for attending. Please boycott every food and tourism spot in Vermont, the state where there is more concentrated anti-Semitism than any other state in the Union. Employers, do not hire anyone from the campuses which have exploded into anti-Jewish and anti-Israel hate fests. Not Harvard, Columbia, UPenn, MIT, or any of the dozens of others. They are trafe to you, untouchable. To the students and faculty who have been so anti-Semitic and who shall soon see their academic careers rot and become worthless, I have these words of advice. Please write them down. Pizza Hut, DoorDash, Grubhub, McDonald's, Uber, and oh yes, Burger King. That is your new career destiny. I hasten to add that your calls, student and faculty alike, for violence against Jews and Israel, your embrace of sexual violence and religious terrorism, your call to burn down the United States, your push to hijack the Democratic Party and bring intifada violence to our nation has already been openly glorified and publicly praised by the Houthi terrorists, the Ayatollahs in Iran, and now the Hamas student organization in Gaza, which has just issued you a directive to escalate your tactics of intifada violence. You are the enemy in our midst. I only hope the female protesters and the trans protesters will visit Gaza, Yemen, or Iran to see and feel the theocratic reception you will get. And now to our primary purpose, to recognize International Farhud Day, June 1st, to commemorate the ghastly violence of June 1st and 2nd, 1941, perpetrated against the innocent Jews of Baghdad by Arab Nazis, that is, Arabs who openly allied with the Third Reich under the leadership of the Mufti of Jerusalem, Hitler ally and confidant Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. This was the two-day riot against Baghdadi Jews to punish them for Jewish presence in Jewish Palestine, at that time under an International League of Nations mandate. As I have described it for over a decade, this didn't start October 7th. When I first wrote the book, The Farhud, parents were viciously killed in front of their children, children murdered in front of their parents, girls mass raped, babies beheaded and thrown into the Tigris River, hundreds of homes and businesses burned, sometimes with the people within them. We will never know the true numbers of dead and wounded and the structures that were destroyed. My journey with the Farhud began 20 years ago when I wrote the best-selling, critically acclaimed book, Banking on Baghdad, which wrote of the so-called forgotten pogrom. The Sephardic community worldwide came to me and pleaded for a further telling. So, 15 years ago, I wrote the award-winning and exhaustively researched volume, The Farhud, Roots of the Arab Nazi Alliance in the Holocaust. I lectured here across the country and abroad to communities and colleges everywhere to remember the Farhud. It became a movement that demanded recognition by the Holocaust Museum and our own Jewish establishment, too often imbued with the Ashkenazi European experience, and eventually working with elite leaders in our community, and I mean elite. I secured an extraordinary session at the United Nations where I personally proclaimed International Farhud Day from a live, globally streamed UN event. That was June 1st, 2015. And since then, every year on about June 1st or 2nd, Jewish groups here and abroad, each in their own way, from London to Sydney to Los Angeles, have been observing International Farhud Day. Google has even included it in its list of holidays and observances. And earlier this week, the Israeli Knesset announced that it was passing a law making Farhud Day an official holiday observance in the Jewish state. You may learn more at thefarhud.com, F-A-R-H-U-D, thefarhud.com. Thank you, world. When asked why I did this, since I'm not Iraqi but Polish, I always answer because no one else would, and that is the chief criterion for me to dive into any injustice. In that vein, since I started the Edwin Black Show 5 years ago, I've always made a point of doing a special show on the date. These shows have been commemorations, bringing to the attention of the world the horrors of that day, which are so similar to the horrors of October 7th, 2023, so similar to the massacres at Hebron, 1929, Svad, 1834 and 1929. Do I need to go on? Is it in the water with these killers that it happens time and time again? Burn, maim, rape, massacre. This is the well-known, always feared Arab Street, the bloody mob action that every Arab society knows can erupt at the flick of a spark in the flammable world of Arab racial and religious hatred. Many Arab societies are trying to leave that legacy behind, such as the United Arab Emirates and even Saudi Arabia, which is systematically now purging anti-Semitic texts from its school systems. But the Arab Street is the explosive pavement beneath the feet of every Arab nation and every Arab community, even in our own nation. Now bring it forward to today, the today that has been building for years and exploded in a national sea to whining sea and indeed international hate fest against Israel as a surrogate for Jews, especially since Jews overwhelmingly support their homeland. And the pseudo-scholastic, pyroclastic, and also gruesome and enthusiastic rampage against the Jews is every day becoming more and more violent. Bullets and incendiary devices are fired at synagogues in Toronto and elsewhere. No police response. Yesterday, a firebombing of the Israeli embassy in Mexico City where 90,000 policemen were told to stand down and allow the attack to take place. A man in New York yesterday drove his car onto the sidewalk to run Jews over, just as Arabs do in Jerusalem in their ramming attacks. When he missed the first time, he turned around and tried a second time. The rallying cry of Jew hatred is to globalize the Intifada, that is the violent uprising against Jews. Hence, the Arab Street is coming to Broadway and Michigan Avenue. Now we hear that the Biden administration, in order to please the two-state solution, that is Minnesota and Michigan, is preparing to bring in thousands of Gazans without vetting the very people that inspired and cheered the October 7th massacres. Senator Joni Ernst and 35 other senators have signed an official letter to Biden to stop this process right away, to help, quote, avoid an October 7th style massacre on our shores, close quote. The Biden administration is being secret about the influx, to which Senator Ernst stated, the Biden administration is blowing off my work to prevent an October 7th related attack on our own shores, which I'm continuing to quote, which shows just how seriously this president takes our security. Canada is also importing Gazans. The number was 1,000 and has just been increased fivefold to 5,000, according to Minister of Immigration Mark Miller. It's not just the actual Palestinian agitators who are already here and the influx of Hamas-affiliated Gazans. Remember, they can't leave the territory without permission of the terrorist group. They have created here a growing coalition of fellow travelers in their hate movement. This includes low-knowledge college students bolstered by layers of entrenched anti-Jewish faculty and administrators. Just now, UC Irvine moved Jewish studies into poli-sci, demonstrating that Judaism is a political movement to be debated. Also joining forces is the climate movement, and indeed, we see the federally funded Climate Justice Alliance is a main funder of the anti-Jewish campus actions, not to mention the chief spokesbrat of the movement, Greta Thunberg. We even see sectors of the right-wing traditional Nazis joining the movement. They know where we live. They know who we are. The mapping project has linked all names, addresses, and phones in businesses of all Jews and those with Israel contacts in Massachusetts, the same has occurred elsewhere. The entire Ashkenazi Jewish database of 23andMe has been stolen, and now a Canadian firm has made available a facial recognition system that will soon be deployed to pro-Israel marches and Jewish events to capture every Jew's facial features. Hey, you sons of bitches, you need face rec? Start right here. Get it all down. Hey, racial equity warriors listening. The guys who didn't want face rec used for racial purposes and for discriminatory purposes, where are you now? Where are your posts? Farhud Day was about commemoration. That's over. Now it's about preparation. Are you ready for the Farhud coming to America's streets? Do you have a plan? Not a protest letter or a petition, but a plan when the mob comes to your synagogue, your Jewish schools, your street, your driveway. The Arab street is never about one person. It is always about a mob. That is what we have seen throughout history and throughout the world since October 6th, from Dagestan to Los Angeles. They have specialized in intimidating verbal insults, screaming chants, extreme unwillingness to engage in intelligent discussion, and a complete desire to dispossess the Jews of Israel and the Jews in America who support Israel, and then the non-Jews in America who support the Jews of America. Are you telling me that racists in Tulsa in 1921, almost on this very day, did not rampage and burn out a complete population of completely innocent black people? Are you telling me the Democrats did not orchestrate the property liquidation and transfer into concentration camps of Japanese Americans during World War II? Are you telling me that the police did not stand by and do nothing as our streets burned in the wake of the live on TV murder of George Floyd, the so-called Summer of Love? Those same impulses will be harnessed and coagulated, and are now being harnessed and coagulated by the Palestinian movement here. And it won't stop with the streets. It will proceed into the highest and lowest reaches of the government through the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is now being hijacked by Jew hatred. Human rights professor Hassan Abdul Salam has just resigned from the University of Minnesota to take his new position as the head of the abandoned Biden movement. They don't care if they elect Trump. They really care more that they teach the Democratic Party a lesson that they are in control. He stated, I'm quoting here, by defeating Biden, it would signal to the entire political landscape that defending genocide could lead to your defeat, so beware. That's my goal. Promote the message throughout the nation and ensure it's a consistent one. And if Trump is reelected because of this anti-Biden movement, he says, quote, it's a big gift that would come out of punishing the president, that means Biden, and that is an entire party. It will now become a pro-Palestinian party, much more aggressive than we have been in the past, close quote. One Detroit imam publicly bragged, we are on the verge of controlling the Democratic Party, and by that, the entire country. And Sharia is next. So I say, no more commemoration. I say, total preparation. This day you have read about for years, the day I've written about for years, that day is coming to your street and your newspaper's headline. I fear this year, but if not this year, next year. Biden has crossed the river of betrayal. He has publicly condemned those he says, quote, don't understand the Palestinians. And now he has denied Israel the means to finish the job in Rafah and secretly orchestrated those arrest warrants for Israeli officials at the International Criminal Court. He's offered lies about $1 billion package of arms, but the deep details require the IDF to defeat Hezbollah in Lebanon on the ground, not in the air. So he wants more Israelis to die. Biden is a liar and has betrayed America on so many levels, it would take 10 monologues to begin to describe. His administration is filled with Jew haters and Israel haters. His deputy national security advisor is Israel-hating, self-hating Jew Jonathan Feiner. His senior director for intelligence programs at the National Security Council, specializing in the Middle East, is Mahir Batar, the rabid former head of Students for Justice in Palestine, who was actually admonished by Georgetown University. His senior ranks are filled with massively conflicted Iranian personalities, such as Ariana Tabitapad, as a high-level Pentagon officer with clear ties to the Ayatollahs, plus plenty of Arabists and traditional anti-Jewish activists who hope to bring down the Jewish state using their empty suit, Joe Biden. All that matters is that Democrats win this November, and they need Michigan Muslims to do that. And there's 200,000 who say, hell no, we won't go. We're going to remember in November. It's the Michigan state, not the Palestinian state, that matters. And the Democrats, who have switched from a nationally controlled to a locally controlled party, will allow lies to be told, the population to be radicalized, and the Jewish people to be dispossessed for the sake of the next election. Now, I left out 99.9% of everything. Sorry, but I have to. That said, I have with me 4 ideal voices to help us out further. I bring you Rabbi Elie Abadie, who serves in Dubai as a rabbi and is an expert on the Arab street, contemporarily and historically. I also bring you Yossie Hollander. He's in Herzliya right now, one of the planet's most informed threat trend analysis. Thirdly, Sheldon Freilich, president of the VOA Michigan, with his thumb on the pulse of Arab agitation from Detroit to Dearborn. And finally, crisis manager Juda Engelmayer, who works with Jewish community security teams on the ground to guard against such occurrences. So first, I'm going to have a lightning round. I just want a yes or no, and then we'll get into their statements. First, I ask Rabbi Abadie, Rabbi, take your mic and the camera. Do you believe, based on your knowledge of the Arab street, that a Farhud-style pogrom could occur in the United States this year or next year?
Of course, it has been happening already almost a year. What you see in the streets of the United States and the campuses of the universities are Farhuds on a smaller scale. What was the purpose of a Farhud? To kill, maim, burn, attack Jews. That's exactly what they're doing. If they have not killed yet, they already killed somebody several months ago in one of the protests. But so, yes, definitely, it's a resounding yes. And in my eyes, it is happening, and it has happened already at a smaller scale.
And the man you're speaking of who was killed by a university professor when he was hit with a megaphone, and he died, and that was in Los Angeles. I now turn to Yossie Hollander in Israel, in Tel Aviv, North Tel Aviv. Yossie, based on everything you know about what's happening in the world, what's happening in the United States, do you believe that a Farhud-style pogrom could occur this year or next year?
Yes, but most likely first in Europe.
Where do you think first in Europe?
Oh, could be anywhere, but Belgium is probably one of the highly likelihood, but there's not that many Jews left, so I don't know. But definitely Europe is probably is before us. We usually follow Europe like about 10, 20 years later.
Okay, so now let me go to Sheldon Freilich. He's the president of the ZOA Michigan, the best ZOA chapter here. It's the Zionist Organization of America. He's got his thumb on the pulse of Arab agitation in Michigan. Shall take the screen. Yes or no? Can we see a Farhud-style pogrom in the United States this year or next year?
Yes, it could happen, or could be in 3 years. And where it would happen first is on a college campus, or emanating from Dearborn, Michigan.
So you're saying it would start in a college campus, perhaps, and then move out into the surrounding neighborhoods or down the street?
Yeah. Yes, or from Dearborn, Michigan, and then onto a college campus.
And we have identified Dearborn before as an epicenter. My fourth guest is Juda Engelmayer. In this lightning round, Juda, yes or no? Do you believe that a Farhud-style pogrom could occur this year or next?
Well, whether it's organized or lone wolf, I do expect we are preparing and do expect to see things like that, unfortunately.
Okay, well, that's awful. I hate it when I'm even partially right.
You're not right until it happens, Edwin.
Right. Okay, well, let's hope it doesn't happen soon. All right, let's start with Rabbi Abadie. Rabbi, based upon what you know of the Arab street, tell us how the Arab street works throughout history. Tell us about all these massacres, all these rapes, all these burning structures in Sfad, Hebron, Baghdad, and elsewhere. Take the screen and tell us what you know.
So first of all, although the Farhud was kind of a unique event in history, but it wasn't really unique. The only unique part of it is that it was Nazi inspired. But what's not unique about it is that throughout the centuries, and as long as the Jews lived under Islam, of course, they had very wonderful times, but they had also very bad times. So during those bad times, there were plenty of, if we can call it Farhuds, even though may not have been Farhuds like the one that uniquely is called that way. But the Jews suffered throughout the last 14 centuries from the advent of Islam during those times. And yes, they maimed Jews, they persecuted Jews, they forced convert Jews, and they ransacked their possessions and their businesses. So that has been happening in the last 1400 years. Now, what's the Arab street has its own noun, so to speak, and the Arab street has been used as a release valve, release pressure valve of Arab regimes. Due to Arab regimes always begin in a positive way to try to help the Arab population of that country, of that region. Eventually, the leader of that regime becomes a tyrannical dictator and therefore begins abusing his population, keeping the money to himself and his family. And therefore, the population starves, doesn't have money, don't have education, they live in a squalor. And so eventually the Arab street rises up, and the government uses that event as a release pressure valve. Eventually, if the Arab street is strong enough, then a coup d'etat takes place. Now, if you look at the history of Arab regimes since the advent of Islam's, it goes always up and down, up and down, up and down. And that is, it begins again, maybe with a benevolent leader trying to help his people from a previous tyrant. Eventually, it lasts 20, 25, 30 years. Then that same leader becomes a tyrant, becomes somebody who again, abuses his power. And then, therefore, another revolution takes place. So that when we saw the Arab Spring happened over now almost 14 years, many so-called Western journalists and Western thinkers who thought they knew very well the Arab mind, they all claim democracy is coming to the Arab world. We see it change. The only problem that these journalists and these thinkers apparently don't know history. But if they look at the history, as I said, every 20, 25, 30, maybe 35 years maximum, there is, so to speak, an Arab Spring, a revolution in many of those countries, because that is the way that goes, right? Up and down, with a benevolent leader at the beginning, sometimes a bloodthirsty leader that takes power, and then eventually he is kicked out. And so from the establishment of the State of Israel, that Arab street, that event, which is a pressure valve release, has been taken, of course, to improve the position of the government. Instead of being an anti-government event, it becomes an anti-Israel event, because the leader of that Arab country or Arab region immediately projects what these Arab streets people are feeling into Israel. And of course, they immediately buy it, because the leader becomes saying, Israel, our enemy, they're oppressing Arabs, oppressing Arab Palestinian. And so that event turns again becoming anti-Israel and anti-Zionist Arab street. And that Arab street can be extremely dangerous. But as I said, in many occasions, the Arab street is controlled by the government and used as a weapon against Israel and against the Jews, to relieve that pressure that is really should be against the government of that area. Interestingly enough, we can see that in the last 7 months, where there have been protests almost in every single country in the world. Of course, I'm not sure if Fiji had one or New Guinea had one, but certainly United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia did not have a single protests against Israel and against the war. That is something to ponder about, and that is something to see. And the question is why? Well, why? Because as I said, if the phenomenon of Arab Street is usually a event controlled by the government and manipulated by the government to project all the ills that are against the government into Israel, here first there is no in the United Arab Emirates at least, there's no movement against the government, because the government is very benevolent to the population, and of course to the expats also. And certainly the government will not allow a protest against Israel, because they will not allow protests against anybody. And that is how they maintain peace and tranquility in the street. And the UAE becomes really a wonderful country amongst all the Arab countries in the region. Saudi Arabia is another country that they need to control the street, and they have not allowed any protests against Israel. So to summarize, not to take more of the time of this event with all the illustrious guests that you have, Arab Street is an event manipulated by governments, by leadership, to benefit the seat of that government and to project all the ills against Israel. And woe of the person who crisscrosses that Arab Street event at that moment. Yes, it can be killed, it can be maimed. If it is a Jew, it's even worse. Now, as I said, we saw plenty of it in the last 14, 15 years since the Arab Street, where that event has been used and manipulated, at least in Egypt, against Israel, where in reality it was against the country itself.
That was excellent. And of course, we know how vicious these Arab Street outbursts can take place, even against their own people. You well know that government figures have been cut into little pieces and dragged through the streets. You and I both know about those cases. In this case, in the United States, can a movement, can controlling factors, either external or domestic, take the place of the nasty ruler and cause this Farhud type explosion on our streets in America?
Absolutely. It is happening. It is happening in the last 7 months. I mean, the major donors to the Biden campaign are major donors to those organizations that are running these protests in these universities. Here you see a example of a Western style control of the masses by the money that controls also the administration of this country. And so, yes, definitely. And this is basically, it's still kind of hidden in a sense. Unless you investigate, you will not see it, and the major media will not write about it. But we know it is there. That is, people have investigated and have shown that money of major donors that goes to the Biden administration to support that administration and the campaign is the same people that are funding these organizations to protest against Israel, and also the university protests. So yes, it could happen. Eventually, it will be direct with no chutzpah, as they say. The support will be direct, as we have seen in England with the Labour Party in the last decades, in which with no apologies. It was an anti-Semitic Labour Party with pride and with intent. And eventually, that's what will happen with the Democratic Party here in the United States, unless there is a real revolution within the party.
So the Democratic Party, in your view, is at this moment being hijacked from the bottom up?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Unfortunately, the up tier, the people that supposedly are the center Democrats, are allowing that fringe group in the party to take over, and they're not doing anything about it. And that is what's going to topple the Democratic Party.
All right, let's go to Yossie Hollander in Herzliya, a man with his thumb on all the right and wrong trends in the world. Yossie, what do you know and what do you think about Farhud's spreading across the planet and also spilling out over into American streets?
So my fear is that if in the past we dealt with what we call the Red-Green Alliance, that is the left and the Islamists working against us, I'm afraid we now have a five-pronged attack on us. One, I would say, is the left, funded by a lot of those donors that you mentioned. Not all of them necessarily just Democratic donors, but definitely radical donors, whether they're George Soros, the Tides Foundation, or other, but there are plenty of more. We just founded a Jewish philanthropist was funding directly all the organization that did the riots on campus, Gelman. So we're looking at definitely left-wing progressive direction in the United States, Islamist direction with Qatari money, huge manpower and investment of soft war in Iran, targeting both the West and the Jews. And now both China and Russia have joined the fight, not because they actually have something specifically against the Jews of Israel, but they figured out this is one of the best ways to destabilize the West and the United States. So they're shooting now at Jews as well. There's like just about every 3-4 days, there's a new website, social media phenomena, and others coming out of Russia against Jews and against the West, all together at the same time as Jews controlling the world and all this type of thing. So when this kind of firepower is directed at the Jewish people, then don't be surprised if there's also actions on the ground. What prevented action on the ground in the United States in the 30s was actually the Jewish mafia. So the Jewish mafia basically took the job of breaking down the Nazi party in the United States. They could never have any, after the big meeting that they had in Madison Square Garden, they couldn't have any meeting anymore because the Jewish mafia worked. We don't have the Jewish mafia anymore. I suggest we all buy a gun.
All right, well, now just a second. When you say the Madison Square Garden rally, you're speaking of this wall-to-wall rally of open Nazis in uniform with the two-story high rendering of George Washington, correct?
Correct. And after that, there weren't that many big ones, and they slowly disappeared because one, the Jewish organization agreed to cooperate with the Jewish mafia, which cooperated with the other mafias because of their own agreement, and the FBI looked the other way because it fits their what they also wanted to stop it, but they couldn't using the law.
Well, at that time, they also had the House Un-American Activities Committee, which was originally set up not against anti-communists, but set up to find Nazis here. Now, when you say Jews get a gun, the reality is half the Jews in this world have a gun, but they happen to be living within a few miles of you in Tel Aviv. Is that not correct?
Correct. And although Israel took a lot of casualties and is taking casualties, a lot of what Israel is taking right now is due to the bad policy of the United States right now. The United States did not give a go-ahead to Israel to do what it needs to do, and is playing a lot of politics. I don't think it's just, I wish it was just the election in Michigan. I think it's built in right now in the progressive agenda of looking at Israel as oppressor and colonialist country, which is now an article of faith for at least half of the Democratic Party. And definitely a lot of the power centers like media like the New York Times, Washington Post, etc. Add to that the Qatari influence and other influences in the world. It's very dangerous. If you look at most of the groups that participated in the demonstration, a lot of them were not Islamist. They were radical communist groups funded either by China or Russia.
Yes, that's very true. Now, I should say that for those Jews who are seeking to get arms, firearms, and I'm one of those Jews who said I will never look at a firearm, there are Jewish organizations which specialize at the long, involved process of legal acquisition of firearms and of a permit and training. You can't just walk into a shop and say, I own a gun. If you're in Maryland, it takes weeks and weeks of special training and waiting, and they check you out, and then you have to constantly figure out how to obey the law. You are familiar with these Jewish groups that help co-religionists get firearms if necessary, right?
Yes, but I think we need to, so there's what, look, we have a lot of, I think one of the ways the Jewish community is relatively organized, okay, it is about security, okay? We have centralized security, we have funds for that, there's guards in synagogues and other places, etc. But I think I was using it metaphorically to buy a gun. Of course, you need to physically buy a gun, but we have to understand more that we're now at war. And that's war on everything. So we shouldn't say, oh, I don't want to, the New York Times, and it's also good, and I'm a liberal, and I don't know. I think that the I don't know is gone. Okay, we should either we get out there and fight, okay, or we're gonna lose this war, and we're gonna lose it. We're gonna lose the United. We'll have to move out of the United States.
And where are we going to move to, may I ask?
That's a very big question. I mean, one place you could move is New Zealand because you never heard about it in the news, but realistically, probably some will move to Israel, some will move somewhere else. I don't know, but the Jews, there are two types of movements. Okay, I don't think. I think in the end, if this is going to happen, it's going to be Jews moving within the United States more than anything else.
That's right. That is what we predicted. They're going to Florida. They're going to Texas. They're going to Tennessee. Holly's in Tennessee. She'll welcome everybody in. They're going to go to these states, which have already gone on the record with me and elsewhere. We will not abandon the Jews. What a terrible and truthful message you have given. I'm going to Sheldon Freilich now. Shell, you're in Michigan, and your thumb is on the pulse of all the Michigan anti-Jewish, pro-democratic agitation. What do you think is the state of democratic takeover that's being controlled in Michigan? And what do you think is the threat coming out of Michigan? Not a political threat, but a real threat of physical violence.
Thank you, Edwin, and thank you, my fellow panelists. Just two additional points to what was said previously, and then I'll go into and I'll answer your question, Edwin. One, the ramming attack in New York that just occurred yesterday was from a Pakistani immigrant. And in the news reports, the police arrested him, but said it was not a hate crime, and the perpetrator was unhinged. So this is where the media just enables these kind of attacks and doesn't really take it seriously, nor do the police. And I agree with what Yossie was saying, but in terms of our protections here in the United States, the security at the synagogues and the schools are not at the level where it should be. There is security, but not extensively and not in completely in depth the way it should be. But to answer your question, Edwin, the battle that we're in outside of Israel, well, with Israel also, is where Israel is fighting bullets and the missiles. We're fighting the cognitive warfare, the war of public opinion and images that have hijacked agendas against Jews. In the 1980s, it was hijacking airplanes. Now they've hijacked ideas and social justice and all the agendas, and it's being used against Jews. We have Jew hatred on campus, where faculty is intimidated, verbal insults, physical intimidation, and assaults against Jewish students. Jewish students physically barred from accessing parts of campus. Jews faculty and students taking off their visibly Jewish identification, like head coverings and the Star of David's. And we're seeing on campus, as it's been said, that not only faculty and students and non-students involved in it being the perpetrators, but as has been said, significant funding from outside the schools. Nearly 50% of American Jews have changed their behavior out of fear in the last year. And we've seen these pro-Hamas and anti-Jewish encampments on campuses, and the officials don't take them down, but they prevent Jews from physically accessing parts of the campus. What's interesting here at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is a hotbed of anti-Semitism, the encampment lasted for months past graduation, and the graduation and honors convocation was interrupted by these anti-Jewish, pro-Hamas folks. And what's interesting is once these perpetrators went to the regents, the university trustees, a couple of their houses at 4 a.m. in the morning with bullhorns and parked on their lawn, all of a sudden the next day, guess what? The university police forces broke up the encampments violently because the regents were upset. Amazing how the university has the power to do something, but only when the trustees are affected. Here in Southeast Michigan, where I'm located, where we have Dearborn, Michigan, which is a hotbed of anti-Jewish activity. The imams in the mosques are constantly calling for Muslims to slaughter Jews like sheep. Demonstrations in Dearborn are violent. They're verbal, and the police authorities do nothing about it. You mentioned the Farhud. That was the authorities in Iraq were allowed it to happen. This is what's going on here in the United States. All these violence and these activities are allowed to happen. One point, there's no action by governmental officials. As you mentioned, campus security are told to stand down. No action by state governors or U.S. attorneys against these protesters. No action by the Federal Department of Justice against these protesters. These protesters are enabling Hamas. The Students of Justice for Palestine is a Hamas-affiliated organization. They're enabling a terrorist designated entity. The officials are allowing these activities to occur. These entities are Muslim Brotherhood linked. There's no action by the Federal Department of Education, which is supposed to enforce civil rights violations. And the penalty for violations of these civil rights against students is withholding federal funding from the universities. The Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education, is out to lunch, is nowhere to be seen. And remember, public universities and private universities are complicit in enabling this, and both types of universities depend on federal and state funding. Even private universities depend on federal funding for their students in the matter of financial aid. So all that funding could be withheld easily, but the officials are enabling it and allowing all the actions to occur. And remember, the public universities are creations of the state. The state legislatures create the public universities and they fund them with tax dollars. So all the officials have the authority to stop the Jew hatred and the support for Hamas, but they're out to lunch. They're nowhere to be seen. So Jew hatred has become normalized.
Wow, how upsetting. So, Shell, yes, no, is it coming or is it not coming?
It is coming. Whether it'll be this year or next year or in 2 years, Farhud could occur. And as I mentioned earlier, it'll probably emanate from a college campus. All these pro-Hamas and anti-Jewish demonstrators, they've all said, okay, the schools are out for the summer. We'll just come back in the fall and we'll ramp it up again. And with the election in November, they're going to ramp it up.
That's right. All right. So what are the Jews in Detroit doing? Signing petitions and sending letters to the editor? Or are they organizing? Don't you, the ZOA, have self-defense courses going on?
We do. And we have another self-defense course coming up just shortly in a synagogue. And so we are organizing, and many Jews are carrying arms more and more. If you go to synagogues, most of the Israelis that attend are packing heat. The problem is the liberal Jews do not want to carry arms. In fact, there's some conservative synagogues that have policies you're not allowed to bring arms into the building. You go to an Orthodox synagogue, it's very common for many of the attendees to be packing heat even on Shabbat. In the conservative synagogues, not so much. Most of the synagogues have a security guard on the holidays and on Shabbat, on Saturday mornings for services. But when services are occurring in the morning or evening, Friday night or during the week, there's no security. The day schools, the Jewish day schools, have security. Most of the federations have organized security very well, but the afternoon schools that are located at these synagogues, the afternoon schools that have Sunday morning or Wednesday afternoon religious schools, many of those synagogues don't have security during those hours. Some synagogues do, some don't. The smaller synagogues basically can't afford it.
And you're also teaching Krav Maga, which is self-defense, correct?
Correct.
Now we are waiting for our important panelist, Judah, to find some signal and come in. So I want to ask you another question. Knowing the Jewish community in Detroit, which is one of America's most vibrant Jewish communities, what percentage of the sleeping Jews are slowly waking up?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. I'd say that 40% have woken up.
40% of the sleeping Jews have woken up.
Yes. That means 60% have not.
All right. Yossi, what percent of the sleeping Jews have woken up?
I would actually don't know, but I would say the following. 10% have decided to go all in left and radical because their world is broken up, but they don't want to give it up. 10% have moved right completely, say, okay, I got it, I was wrong. I'm not gonna believe this nonsense anymore, the woke nonsense. But the other 80% don't know what to do. I think they're kind of locked in and say, wait a second, it's something I believed in, values that I thought were important for 40 years have now failed me. They're going after me. But on the other hand, what am I going to do? I mean, this is what I believed. So am I going to go against everything I was? But yet they are attacking me. So I think there are more people than anything that just don't know what to do.
And I think we should remember this, people, the Jews do not have friends. The Jews have allies from time to time, and they have enemies from time to time, but they do not have friends. So, like my father, sleep with the suitcase under the bed. Now we've got Juda Engelmayer. Judah's important because, Judah, how's your signal?
My signal's great now.
Okay. Where the heck are you?
I am on 116th Street and Lenox Avenue.
All right, well, watch yourself.
Yes, thank you.
Because it's not just the Arab Street, it's the New York Street, too.
It's the New York Street, yes.
Okay, so you're closely aligned with the groups that go from synagogue to examine the doors and the entrance facilities and to help them get secure, correct?
It's more than that. It's also to actually serve as security, also do counter surveillance, help people, help notify the local law enforcement when there's an issue, take matters to our own hands if we need to. We're taught to protect and defend. The saying we learn is run, fight, hide. I'm sorry, run, hide, fight. But that's what we train the members of the synagogues to do. We're not supposed to do it. We're supposed to be there to engage, interact, and hopefully try to keep it, try to de-escalate problems, but act if we have to act. What Yossi said earlier about getting guns, it's inevitable. New Jersey's rules have changed, New York's rules have changed, and a lot of people in Jewish communities are arming themselves and getting themselves trained properly.
All right, now I want to caution our viewers that the rules on gun ownership and deployment, including the mere showing of your gun through your shirt.
In most states, and it's not allowed. You cannot brandish it. You
right.
Only pull it out if you're intending to use it. Other than that, you should never, ever pull it out and should never intend to use it unless it's really life or death situation. And even then, depending what state it's in, it's very speculative on whether or not that law's on your side.
And you cannot, in our state and many states, we don't have a stand your ground or stand your...
No.
Basically, in Maryland, you can only deploy a weapon if you're in fear of your life. not in fear of your property. So people need to check very, very carefully. So Judah, how many synagogues is your group servicing in how many states?
So we're in about 13 or 14 states now, operating in well over 250, close to 300 synagogues right now, of all different denominations, Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, it started out mostly Orthodox, but more people are getting on board with it now, as you can imagine. And we train local volunteers because who else knows your community better? So, law enforcement is not going to keep people out of your synagogue. If somebody wants to come in to pray, a local cop is not going to tell a guy he can't come in. So who knows their synagogues better other than the community members? I know what looks right and who feels right for the shul that I go to. And that's what we're training other people to do, to look out for your own place. So it makes it easier to control access and to keep people that you don't want out and keep people that we want in and to keep them safe.
All right, now look, you're often guarding against the lone wolf attack. Are you?
Well, we're first of all, so far I haven't had a guard against any of that. Thank God. In 12 years since I've been doing it. But yes, we're trained for both lone wolf, but also terrorist cell operations. How to watch out for those, how to prevent them. If you can, those things never happen in just a day. There's usually surveillance, there's planning, there's a whole process that goes on before a terrorist cell will operate. And we train our people to look out for those things, to watch out for them, and to help work to dissuade it or get law enforcement involved if we think that it's happening sooner.
And what do you do about the mob of college kids, Gefias, that wants to storm the shul and say from the river to the sea? What do you do about a group of 300 guys?
Well, if we know they're coming, we get a bigger force. We get other volunteers from other synagogues involved where we're going. We've had this before. We work with local law enforcement as well. But what we do is we try to keep the groups apart. You want to protest and scream from the river to the sea? Do that all you want. Don't touch our people. Don't engage with our people. Stay across the street, and we'll keep our people across the street. Our job is really to de-escalate and make sure that they don't engage with each other, because we don't. Once that happens, then all chaos breaks loose.
In New York and New Jersey, are the Jews ready or are they still asleep?
I think they're getting more ready than you would think. It took them longer. There were a few of us who was ready all the time, and it took a little bit of convincing on October 7th for the other people to realize they got to get ready.
I'm going to bring up a topic. Are you still with us, Judah?
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm going to bring up a topic that you and I and all of our panelists know about, but some of our viewers may not know about. It's called Shamrim.
Yes.
SHOMRIM. These are the guardians of the community. And in New York, in Queens and Brooklyn, they're actually like auxiliary New York police. Tell us, are more Shamrims coming into the fore to protect the community?
Yeah, so we're putting that together right now. And if actually in our neighborhood, there's a movement to build one. And it takes insurance, it takes cooperation with local police. It's not a simple thing to put together for a lot of legal reasons, but we're doing it right now. And other communities are doing it as well.
So these guys are in uniform. It's not a vigilante group. They're only interested in guarding the community, correct?
That's what it's supposed to be. We don't want that vigilantism.
That's right, because we're too civilized for that. Isn't that the case?
Yes, exactly.
I want to ask Rabbi Abadie, do you have another comment to make before I take questions? Thank you, Judah.
Just a comment about where is safe for Jews to live. Unfortunately, Western democracy has failed the Jews miserably. I mean, 10 years ago, we would not have thought of where should we go from here. Even 5 years ago, maybe we would not have thought that. But now, certainly, we are thinking about that. And within the United States, although it's true between Florida and Texas and maybe Tennessee, you mentioned, they're welcoming to us. But as long as you have a Western democracy-style government, and whatever 4 or 5 years from now, that can flip, and the voters can change who the governor is and who the administration is, and then the Jews are going to be again persecuted like any other state in the United States. Ironically, And then looking at any Western democracy in the world, none of them are safe for the Jews. Actually, they're probably the most unsafe countries to be in all of Europe, North America. Of course, part of South America too, and for Africa, there's even not mentioned. Ironically, I would think the only three countries that the Jews will be very safe is one, United Arab Emirates, two, Saudi Arabia, once they normalize and even if without normalizing, Jews can live there quietly, but very safely, and possibly China. These are the three countries that I think the Jews will be very safe. And now look at the common denominator of these three countries. Strong governments that will not allow the crap of freedom of expression, freedom of assembly to a point of ad nauseum and ad absurdum that Western democracies allow that. And the law in the United Arab Emirates, when I landed there 3 years ago, was told by the Minister of Security, is very easy. Rabbi, if anyone would look at you bad, if anyone would say something to you, if anyone would do something to you, you have nothing to worry about. We'll take care of them. It's 5 years in prison or $75,000 in fine. And then if anyone dares, he tells me, to do that. When I asked him, do I need a security detail? As I was known, I was already on TV in the newspapers, very widely welcomed in public. I said, do I need a security detail? His answer was, did anybody do something to you? I said, no. Did anybody say something to you? I said, no. Did anybody look at you the wrong way? I said, no. He said, then you have nothing to worry about. In fact, he said, we have been protecting you from the moment you landed in the airport of Dubai and every day. So you have nothing to worry about. Unfortunately, that's the reality. Western democracies have failed the Jewish people miserably.
And the Jewish people have worked so hard to perfect, and I myself, and count myself among them, to sustain and enliven these democracies. I'm ashamed right now to say that Hungary said we are the safest country in Europe for Jews. Can you imagine that Hungary, which sent 250,000 Jews in a few weeks on trains into Auschwitz, says, and has their anti-Semitic parties, says we, not London, not France, not Italy, not Belgium, not Sweden, not Norway, Hungary is the safest place for a Jew. And I'll tell you something, and you can back me up. I just came from Poland, and 99.9% of everybody I met in Poland was not anti-Semitic. Poland is no longer a babushka society, and there were plenty of people who were very gracious to me in Poland. But I will say this, when I went to Friday night service in the Warsaw Synagogue, this is how it was. I had a car take me within about a block. I had to walk through several yards. We were surrounded by SWAT teams to walk into this little one synagogue. And there was an emergency vehicle parked outside in case of a terrorist attack. That was to light candles on a Friday. Yossi, tell us something before I take questions.
I can't tell you right now what's happening in Poland, not my expertise exactly, but definitely there is if you look at what's happening in Europe, this is not about the West. This is not just a Jewish problem, okay? It's not just a Jewish problem in the US. I mean, you look at the situation of many cities, the collapse of values, the collapse of universities is way beyond just the Jews. So in the fight against it, we have to get a little bit, not just, it's not ourselves, it's about a lot of allies. I think it's a fight for the survival of the Western democracies. And I don't agree so much with the conclusion that they are lost, but I think some countries in Europe are already lost.
Let's go to some questions. We're running late. Here's the watch party in Chicago. my hometown. I'm a Black woman from 29th and Cal, that's California, on the south side of Chicago, that's right near the House of Corrections, a prison. And I ask why Blacks have voted for the Democrats when we're just feeding our own exploitation. Do you think this time it will be different? Everyone I know is voting for Trump, even if they're keeping it quiet. All right, I'll answer this question. First, the Blacks are very smart people now, and they're sick of hearing about this word employment. They don't want employment opportunities. They need enterprise opportunities, career opportunities, ownership opportunities. When I die, I got a house, it's going to my wife and then to my daughter. When you are just a renter, you got nothing. The Blacks want their share of the pie, and the Democrats have just been giving them fake programs with fake promises, and they say, where have we come in 30 years, in 50 years? We still have the same blight in the same cities. And that's why a few minutes ago, an MSNBC commentator, quote, begged Black people not to vote for Trump. Now, the majority are going to vote for Biden, but there has been a massive defection of Black people and other minorities to Trump, and that's because they are part of America, and they want America to thrive, and they know what a lousy justice system is, and they know what the weaponization of a justice system is. And so I think that many more Black and people of color, especially African descent from African nations and Afro-Caribbeans and enterprise Blacks, they are going to be not voting for Biden, probably voting for Trump, whether they say so or not.
I agree with you. The Blacks see the economic benefits when Trump was president from all of his policies, and they see for the last 3 years things have gone downhill rapidly. And I agree with you. I think that although the majority of African Americans will vote Democrat, there's a significant minority that will vote for Trump, and same in the Latino communities. There's a significant shift in the Latino communities toward Trump.
And, you know, so many of these Black communities, especially in Chicago, with Chicago, the fix is in, it's always going to go Democratic. But they're saying our schools and our field houses and our parks and our opportunities are being squandered on what's coming in from the southern border. And they don't like these policies either. They just want a chance to compete on an equal footing. All right, guys, we're out of time. I want everybody to hold for my closing word of wisdom, just 1 minute away. But first, I want to thank my very knowledgeable guests, Sheldon Freilich, Yossie Hollander, Juda Engelmayer, and Rabbi Elie Abadie. I also thank my talented international team, including Holly in Nashville, get the basement ready, Eve in New Jersey, Richard in the Philippines, keep up your good work, Luca in Serbia, you're great, as well as many others in numerous additional cities around the world. My team, each of them, is comprised of very dedicated people. And we all owe them. I'll see everyone back here in 2 weeks at 3 p.m. Eastern. You want to be a friend? The Edwin Black Show? Go to theedwinblackshow.com/support. Keep me independent. Want to hear me in person? Watch my website for events. Consult my events page at edwinblack.com. Until then, head over to any Barnes and Noble in the USA or any Amazon, Walmart, Apple Books, Google Books, or Kobo platform in 190 countries across this roiling, toiling, boiling planet, where you can find any of my 200 book editions, such as IBM and the Holocaust and the Farhud. You want an autographed copy? Hit my personal, newly redesigned website, edwinblack.com, and click books. Get access alerts to participate live in future shows at theedwinblackshow.com. You'll see a much enhanced and exquisitely produced version of this show and prior episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channel at The Edwin Black Show. Click the notification button like tens of thousands of others have. You will love them. We put new ones up each week, produced by a bold international crew. Follow me on Edwin Black Book and whatever X is, as well as Facebook. And now for my closing word of wisdom. You may think you are a molecule, but the fact is, when we get together, we're heavy molecules. I'm zooming out from our nation's capital. I'm done. Bless all of you.